Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:09 p.m. Central. We got the Dale here with us from the Delicious Recipe. He's co-hosting tonight. I did his show the other night, so you can see that on the archives, Delicious Recipe, and I'm on that. And also, Dale Wham was supposed to be here, but that big crazy apocalyptic storm knocked out all her lights and internet, and she's got a bathtub full of water right now. That's what I was told. So that's crazy, and a lot of people are going through that right now with that superstorm that just shot across. Even the temperatures have dropped here in Florida, and it's raining here. So I don't know if it's exactly from that, but it seems creepy all the way around with this storm for sure. But a few things I need to plug, and we'll get to our guest. First off, YouTube, check out the UFO Paranormal Radio group. And yes, that's UFO Paranormal Radio twice for some reason, but check it out. You'll remember it at least. But the other one, let me make sure I got this one right with Dell. It's the UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials channel on YouTube, right?
Yep.
All right. And you can check us out on Twitch and Twitter, iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeart. We're all over the place. And, of course, there's churchofmabusradio.com. That's the site where you can go hang out there and listen to the show, or you can go to the paranormalradionetwork.org, and that goes to the SoundCloud with every show from the network. So that's it. That's the plugs. Tonight's guest, Robert Bosnak. It's great to have you here, Robert.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
So you just got in from Australia. That's what.
Yes, yesterday.
What were you up to over there? I mean, can you give us business or pleasure?
Both.
Okay.
My wife is from Sydney, and so I spend 5 months a year in Australia and 7 months a year in California.
Cool. I interviewed Stephen Strong before about the Aboriginals there, and was in New Dawn magazine with that, which was pretty cool. That stuff over there with the Aboriginals, I love it. I love it. Mm-hmm. It's like a specialist.
Is he an Aboriginal?
No, I don't believe he is.
Yeah,
but he hangs out with them for sure, because there's a lot of photos with them and stuff, and it's just interesting. I try to have a lot of people on about shamanism from native cultures and stuff, so that's why I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I wrote a book about that, but that's not what we're talking about.
Okay. And, well, I guess you were trained in Switzerland. That's your psychoanalyst?
Yes.
Okay. And tell us exactly, I mean, I was trying to, go over that earlier in my head. What is a psychoanalyst exactly? I know it's probably complex and you could say it forever, but what's the breakdown, so to speak?
Well, psychoanalysis started in around 1890, 1895 with Freud. I think that everybody here will have heard of Freud. And then it started to spread, and one of his earliest followers was C.G. Jung. And my training was at the C.G. Jung Institute in Zurich. And that kind of psychoanalysis following Jung is very much about images and about how the imagination influences us. And from that, my work developed what I call embodied imagination, which is now practiced worldwide, which is how imagination affects the body. So I'm very interested in what I call the involuntary imagination, not what we want to imagine or try to imagine, but what is imagining us while we're dreaming, because dreaming is my specialty. I've worked with dreams now for about 50 years, and I've worked about 50,000 dreams. And so I spend a lot of time in the dream world with people. And that fascinates me, that world of imagery that is involuntary, that creates itself every night, where we suddenly find ourselves somewhere else and we are completely convinced that we're awake. That world interests me endlessly.
Dreams are definitely fascinating, and I know you specialize in dreams. And I guess my point of view with dreams is, what is it exactly? Is it us in the spiritual realm in our spirit body? Is it, people say it's just your brain making a television show while you're sleeping. There's so many theories on it. I
Yeah,
would think it was walking other realms, from a shamanistic point of view, that
yeah.
it's realm walking. What can you tell us about some of these dream states?
Well, I think in the first place, nobody knows, and I don't know either. So when you ask a person about dreaming, the only thing that you will find out is their opinion about the world. So if your opinion about the world is that it's shamanism, then dreams are shamanism. If your opinion about the world is that everything is material and therefore it is a quake in the brainstem, then that's your theory. So I am what is called a phenomenologist. So I am only interested in the experience. And so I'm interested in what people are experiencing while dreaming. So I
Mm.
have no opinion what it is, where it's taking place, what the substance is. I just know that we meet quasi-physical beings because we wake up, so we know it's not physical, but they're quasi-physical. They present themselves as physical. We are in an environment that is entirely embodied. That's why my work is called Embodied Imagination. That's all we know. And then you wake up in your culture. And I've traveled all over the world asking people for their dreaming, and everybody has a different opinion. The opinions don't matter to me. Just what matters to me is how do people experience themselves in this world of dreaming.
Isn't that sort of interesting? Like, because I did a couple shows on about dreams there before, and I remember this part. There was that Sigmund Freud. I guess he had written a book there about dreams, and it mostly was about having sex with his mother. Every sort of symbolism was having this part in there, and I think uh, just my opinion, though, I think a lot of people have taken from that and think that was what dreams are, because that's what they were taught and they were told, because that narrative was pushed so heavily upon everybody else.
Yes, and that's why the field of psychoanalysis began to develop because lots of people disagreed with that, even though sexuality, as we all know, is super important and is a very big drive in our lives. And and there is something in this incestuous state of mind that we all have that is really important, but it's not the only thing. And then Adler came out with the notion that it's all about power and about the feeling of inferiority, and that's why you want power. And then Jung came out and said it is about curiosity and the life of spirit. And so that those were our all different views on dreaming that then became more and more. And these days, we are talking very much about how they are uh, how they are relationships that we have with the world, and it's more seen as relational. So every era has its own interpretation of dreaming, and in the 20s of the 21st century, my notion of it is that it is experiencing of a real world that presents itself as entirely real, that we find ourselves in, and we don't know where it comes from. We only know that it is and that we are traveling through it.
Hmm. I know the Native Americans, they have a thing called dream walking, and they believe in this is where you can actually travel through your dreams and actually interact with somebody else in their part of their dream. And
Mhm.
you've come across that at all?
Yes, and there are several cultures that believe that and that have that as their. It's also uh, in like 12th century, 13th century Muslim culture. It was very strong that you can through visionary means encounter others. Um, but I think that uh, I have never worked with somebody who does that, so I cannot tell you anything about it. Um, I know that people do a lot of traveling and a lot of moving around and a lot of communicating with other beings and other entities. Some of them are human and some of them clearly are not. and that communication is going on all the time. And I'm sure that there are people who can become what we call lucid. They can move into lucid dream state where they can direct themselves through this dream world more clearly. But when I worked with an Aboriginal medicine man, since we started out before about shamanism in Australia, when I asked him, he becomes an eagle and he flies with the patient on his back to the center of the galaxy, and he falls on something that sticks out and it pierces him and his patient, and then he flies back. And I asked him, "Do you think that that's a dream?" And he said, "Absolutely, this is not a dream." So for him, that is an experience, that is a physical experience. Now, for me, it's hard to imagine that that's a physical experience. I call it a quasi-physical experience, an experience that presents itself as entirely physical, but that you wake up from. But he would not go for that at all. So it depends what culture you talk to.
Definitely fascinating for sure. And so where does creative imagination fit into all this?
Well, I think that in my opinion, every night we are part of the genius of creative imagination, because the dreaming is creating a whole world that it would take Hollywood $100 million and a year to create. A dream creates it in a flash. So that is creative imagination. Creative imagination is world creating constantly. It's constantly making worlds. It's constantly creating new worlds. That is what I mean by creative imagination. And that's why I became so interested in alchemy, because alchemy is very much working with that creative imagination.
There was said there. I'm not sure if it was exactly from Nikola Tesla or not, but he said that he got a lot of his ideas in the dream world that came there. That's what gave him his insight, that he would connect into something. People call it like Akashic records or the great library, and that would give him his ideas and stuff like that. That allowed
Well, he
him
would
to.
see them. He would see them in vision, right? And
Yeah.
that's how he got to the notion of alternating current, and that's how he got in his whole discussion with Edison. But he saw that as a vision of some kind of a pipe that was going in a particular direction and turning in a different direction, and then he realized how to create alternating energy, which was one of the biggest discoveries ever. Yeah, Tesla had that very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And well, with some of my spiritual experiences, and I don't try to push them on anybody, but I try to tell them, is when I've seen these luminous beings of light with my physical eyes. And there were times where I was like, am I dying? Why am I seeing this? And I still don't know. It's been a while since I've seen them, but I saw them many times after my father passed, and there was some witnesses. But it also, I've had experiences to where I've stared into the universe, the heavens at night, and seen those beings like in another plane, which I think there may be a quantum realm around the earth, and it maybe perhaps is where we go when we die and they usher you off wherever. But it seems like also that perhaps when we sleep that we go to that level as well, and that we are these energy beings. And I know there's different theories about what these light beings or whatever are. I've heard it all from angels to aliens to ourselves. And I think it may be ourselves, or maybe it's all of the above. But that dream state, I mean, I'm sure that you have much more intelligence when it comes to talking about dreams than I do. But on a lot of levels, for me, I think it is being in that afterlife realm on some level. Not every dream, of course. I'm sure there's different like prophetic dreams and stuff like that. But based on my experience of seeing those beings, I know shamanisms go into luminous beings of light a lot. It just seems like there's a connection to where there's an afterlife connection or something.
Yeah. And so everybody has their own belief system. And I think that these belief systems are very important because they give particular meaning to your life. And it is something where what I can do in my work is I can help you flash back to those light beings and not experience it just from your perspective, but shift perspectives into those light beings, how they are experiencing you. And so those are the things that I can do. I have no idea where I am. I have no idea who they are, and it doesn't personally interest me, because if I talk to a person in China, they will see something completely different, and if I talk to an Aboriginal, they will see that different, and if I talk to a scientist, they will see that different again. I'm interested in that experience that you're having, and I can
Yes.
help you get back into that experience through a system of flashbacks. And as you flash back into that experience, you can not only see it from Jeffrey's perspective, but move into the perspective of these light beings and see what they're experiencing and feel that from within their presence. So that is
Oh,
basically what I'm doing.
There was one part that I noted, I caught. Maybe I didn't catch this right or whatever, but you'd said there in that Pacifica part is that by monitoring the brain, there was too much information, but you were getting it through that you could see that the physical skin was giving off a reaction to sort of show something. Can you explain that?
Um,
Like there was a way to transfer, like it was real time events that are happening that you'd be able to follow what was going through somebody that was, I guess, that was in the dream state. Was that
um,
was that what it was? I'm not sure if I got that right or wrong.
yeah, I don't exactly know what you're talking about, but what I'm saying is that we never really work with dreams. We always work with the memories of dreams,
Hmm.
and so I help people to get into the memories of dreams and then flash back into them, and then it becomes possible to move into different perspectives. Now, I what I was talking about in that talk was about the mirror world, which is now called the metaverse, and the our interactions with these artificially intelligent beings, and how that is going to develop. And
Hmm.
I'm working on that myself, but I don't quite exactly know what you're referring to.
Okay, yeah, okay. And, yeah, I was listening to it there earlier today, and I thought there was something about how you'd be able to tell if the body was remembering properly, and it was easier to do through. I guess
Oh,
instead of monitoring the brain, that was temperature or feeling or touch or the way that the skin moved it from
oh,
one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's called galvanic skin responses. And Jung, the psychoanalyst that I went to his institute, he died in '61, and I went there in '71, so he was no longer around. But he worked very much. He worked initially also with these galvanic skin responses. It is the way that the autonomic nervous system um, shows itself. So that if you have an experience, like for instance, if you have an experience of these light beings, then the autonomic nervous system is activated. When the autonomic nervous system is activated, you get sweat reactions, and these sweat reactions are on your skin, and then the galvanic skin meter starts to oscillate. That's what the lie detection is all based on, right? Jung created the origins of lie detection. So it is that you can notice in the biometrics the way that internal life is happening to people in their autonomic nervous system.
Okay, that explains it a little bit better.
definitely, definitely. And I know you mentioned alchemy, and I've heard of alchemy. I know you know a lot more about it than I do, for sure. My extent is like Saint Germain or something from like those weird Summit University books or something, or some of that weird stuff with that the Count Saint Germain that remains ageless and stuff like that. Which, but I'm just kind of curious, what else can you tell us about alchemy? Like, I mean, some history of it maybe, and just some more
Mhm.
about it.
Well, alchemy came into being in probably the Egyptian era, when it was a movement together of mummification. Mummification was to create eternal life, to create eternal form, and dye making, and metallurgy. All of those came together with lots of ritual around it. And that came to be slowly the notion that we can transform metals from one state to another. And that we can create healing forces that heal not just humans, but can heal the metals. And the notion was that a sick metal was lead. Lead was a sick metal, and you could heal that sick metal into its desire to become gold. And that's how alchemists could transform lead into gold, by stimulating the desire in lead to become gold. And so the notion of alchemy is that it has a lot of elements of that are also in astrology. The notion of the alchemist is that there is an eternal world that is called the firmament. That's where the stars are. And then there's a world in between, and that is the world of the wanderers. The word wanderer is planetos, that we call that planets. And so that these in-between beings that are between us and eternity, they have different qualities. And these beings, these in-between beings that we see as planetos, as wanderers, they each put their seed into the earth. And so the seed of Venus is copper, the seed of Mars is iron, the seed of Jupiter is tin, the seed of the moon is silver, the seed of the sun is gold, and Mercury is mercury. And so all these different seeds, all
What
these
about
different
what about Saturn? Saturn
is lead. And
lead.
so
Okay. That's me, Saturn.
well, that's very heavy. And so it's very heavy and very distant. And so all these elements were in the earth. And and then they said in alchemy that every metal has the desire to become gold. And that what the alchemist needed to do is to stimulate the desire in the metal to become gold. And that's basically what I've studied for the last 50 years and what I've written now several novels about.
That's interesting how with alchemy that the planets, relate with different traits and things like that. And I know people have different views of the planets as gods and weird stuff like that. But as far as like the grittiness of alchemy, is it a person in a lab like Merlin, the wizard in a lab, messing with potions and stuff? Is that kind of like the dirty work?
Well, alchemists were always working in laboratories. They were usually physicians, and they were usually not magicians. They were physicians trying to find medicine to help, because the notion was that if you can create from poison a remedy, then you can heal people. So they would make, that's basically what we now have in the old ways of making vaccines. You take something that makes a person sick and you dilute it and you dilute it and you dilute it and you give it to a person, and then it becomes a remedy because the immune system begins to react. So that kind of notion, alchemy by its nature is homeopathic. So it begins to take from poisons. It circulates poisons and works on poisons until they become very potent remedies, and that's what they would give to their patients, and that's how they would work with the metals. So the alchemist was both a physician and a metal worker. So that's why they worked a lot with herbs. And one of the greatest alchemists of all time was named Paracelsus, and Paracelsus would create an enormous amount of different medicines.
Paracelsus, and then Hippocrates, was that alchemy or just
No,
that was medicine?
No,
medicine.
Hippocrates was about 500 years before that. Hippocrates was from 2,500 years ago, 500 BC. He was the first of the physicians, the one that followed Asclepius, the god of healing. And so Hippocrates was the one who rationalized medicine. So that's why the physicians now still have to make their oath to Hippocrates that they shall not harm. And Hippocrates was the one who kept on using dreaming as the central form of healing. So, but that was very different, was long before alchemy.
And when it comes to the alchemy in gold, does that mean actual gold, or is that like a spiritual transformation term that as well?
Well, the alchemists always talk about the vulgar gold and our gold. The vulgar gold is the gold that we all know, and our gold is the red sulfur, and that's what my books are about. Our gold is the red sulfur that transforms other metals into gold. So it's stronger than gold. It's more potent than gold because it can transform other metals into gold. So it's the highest form of creativity.
Hmm. This because I had a show I did about why gold, and I could never find a part about this, is that why are human beings there's fascinated with getting or obtaining gold, because it doesn't actually for like the, I guess we did the human gold that we have here. You figure water and air would be more important to a human being than a precious metal. And like back then, a long time ago, as far as we know, they didn't have electronics. I know gold is a good transporter of
Yeah, but that had
electricity,
nothing to do with it.
and
No.
and just I've never found a part there is that why this whole fascination and this push of
Because
gold.
gold is seen to be the seed of the sun, and everything revolves around the sun. The sun makes everything grow. The
Right.
sun creates life. So as gold as the seed of the sun,
Okay.
therefore is as precious as the sun itself.
Okay,
Huh.
but so is a lemon, and a lemon
No,
you can eat.
no. The lemon. You're asking about how it was seen in other times, in
Right.
pre-scientific times. Um, the lemon was never seen to be the seed of the sun. The seed of the sun, the most potent seed of the sun, was seen to be gold. So therefore, gold was very precious because it represented the sun,
Okay.
and so it was the source of all life.
Okay.
That's
So
it.
somebody
That's it. Yeah,
so
that's
somebody came up
interesting.
with that. Somebody came up with it, that they said gold is okay. This is what it's going to
I
represent, and then
don't know.
everybody just followed along with it.
No, it is uh, in alchemy. They would say that that the sun self manifests in gold, and so that you can, by working with gold, you can be in touch with that solar energy. This came up. How it came up, I don't know. It could be, they would say it's a self manifestation of the sun.
Okay.
So, and you would say, because you come from Western individualism, somebody came up with that idea. That's just that's, you're looking at it differently than the alchemist does. The
Okay.
alchemist says it is the planetos, or the sun, as this moving entity between eternity and mortality, that brings us the gold. And so it's a self manifestation of the sun. Um, you have to realize what culture you come from. We come from a culture of Western individualism, and therefore we think that somebody came up with that idea. And the alchemist would say, no, not somebody came up with that idea. The sun self manifests itself.
Okay.
That's the way that in other cultures they talk about the gods. The sun is a god, right? The sun is one of the central gods, Apollo, or whatever you would call the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And Native Americans would say that there are certain animals that are self manifestations of the gods. So it is not somebody came up with that idea
Okay.
from their perspective. It is, that's how the gods self manifested.
This is definitely fascinating for sure. Just and I know the sun. There's so many fascinating ways to look at the sun. I've had weird experiences spiritual with the sun that have been kind of odd many times. a lot of things that I do, like I'll close my eyes and let that white light fill me. And I've had some pretty strange experiences just doing that with the sun. I think there's a soul connection with the sun and us, but I've never heard that about gold. That's interesting for sure. Definitely pretty neat. Where do colors fit into all this? I know there's a way about colors.
Yeah, alchemy is talking about the way that something moves from quality to quality. Because if there is a movement from lead to gold, then there's a movement from one quality into another. And so they have systems of seeing what colors are in their qualities, and they would see that green is where it all begins, like the greening of nature. And in alchemy, it would be the copper oxide that grows onto copper. Um, and then the green would turn black when everything falls apart. It's the black of night. And in the night, everything falls apart. And it's a time of dread and fear and war and all that kind of stuff. And then it would turn into the blues. And the blues are about sadness and about the way that we long back and the feelings of loss. And then it would go into light blue, and the light blue would be related to the spirit and the sky. And then it would go into silver, and silver would be the way that you start to reflect on it. And then it would move into yellow, and the yellow would be the way that it begins to ferment, and that fermentation then reaches its culmination in gold, and that is red. So those are the colors in alchemy.
So were these alchemists ever like persecuted and stuff like some of the other people throughout history? Did they get, weird stuff like that, like from the church and craziness, we're going to burn you, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, I think that like people like Giordano Bruno was burnt at the stake, and the church, Giordano Bruno is a very important thinker in the late 16th century. The church was against anybody who was against their orthodoxy. And of course, all of science started against the church, Galileo. And they were all banished. So they were, many of the early scientists were alchemists. Isaac Newton was an alchemist. And Robert Boyle, who's the father of chemistry, was an alchemist. So there was a strong movement, and that's what my books are about, the Red Sulphur books, how science came into being, how the church tried to push it back, how the battle between the freedom of science and the repression of the church started to play out in the 17th century. Because the 17th century is for me, next to our own period, the 17th century is in Western culture, in European culture, is the most interesting moment in history to me, because that's where we moved away from alchemy, and we moved into a way of observing and putting ourselves outside of things and looking in. Whereas before that, we were always part of it, and we were experiencing things by participation, and then science cut that off, and we became looking at things, and that's how we still are today, in that cut-off state.
I'm looking up Giordano Bruno and on Wikipedia, and I want to learn more about him. But I'm seeing it says that he said the stars were distant suns surrounded by their own planets, and raised the possibilities that these planets might foster life of their own. Cosmological position known as cosmic pluralism. And then he also insisted the universe is infinite and could have no center. And they killed him, of course.
Yeah, of course they killed him. And so he was one of the most important thinkers of that era. And we know now that much of what he was saying actually is similar to what we hold as true. And so if we would be transported back to the 16th century, we would all be burned at the stake for what we're saying now about reality.
Yes, true.
One thing there, because I see this Alchemy Saga Red Sulphur, and it just brings into a memory of a movie I watched, or a documentary about Cinnabar, and and mercury, and how much that was sort of important in Egypt times or ancient times. And is that explain?
Yeah,
Can you cinnabar? Like this is a thing that
yeah,
I never even really even knew about it really, or thought about it in the
yeah.
last.
Cinnabar is red, and it's a sulfate and a combination of mercury and a sulfate, and it is for the alchemist the beginning of the work. From that, that's what they call the prima materia. Very frequently, it began with cinnabar, and they from that would start extracting the sulfur, but mainly they try to extract the mercury because mercury is very essential to alchemy. It's called the live silver. It is the medium of alchemy. Everything happens in mercury. And so it's basically the refinement of mercury that comes from cinnabar, the refinement of mercury. And as mercury is more and more refined, then it becomes gold. So mercury is the medium.
Okay.
And so red sulfur is actually the driving force that forces that change, that forces that movement from one quality to the next to its highest quality. That's what red sulfur does. It's also called the philosopher's stone or the sorcerer's stone. It's all different names for the same substance.
Was that Saint Germain name something that's bogus, or was that a real guy that was in the alchemy? Do you know much about that, Saint
I
Germain?
don't know much about Saint Germain. Of course, I know the name, but I've never studied him. And there are many. The interesting thing about alchemy is that they have many pseudo names. So they used names like Aristotle and Plato, and they used it as if these statements were made by these people so that they would get the authority of those people. So when it is said that Saint Germain said, we don't know if that was Saint Germain or a pseudo Saint Germain.
Yeah.
And that's why in alchemy, when they do text analyses, it's very much about pseudo Aristotle, pseudo Plato. There are lots of pseudonyms used in order to gain the authority from the people that they were talking with, because they always needed the authority. So to show what they were saying was real.
There's so much stuff about Saint Germain. I've seen like fiction vampire books about Saint Germain. I didn't read them, but there's just all kinds of weird stuff about that for
The
sure.
alchemist that I'm talking about in my novels is called Mundanus, and he's a historical character. He wrote a book. He wrote a long letter, 67 pages, explaining alchemy, and he was said to be able to transmute lead into gold. And in my series of 4 novels, what happens is that Mundanus has this philosopher's stone. He's the last to have the red sulfur. The red sulfur is no longer being made. He got it from his ancestor 150 years before. The end of alchemy. Alchemy culminates in the 15th century, and then it starts to die off. And from the high point of alchemy, from the end of the 15th century, there is this character called Trismosin, who was seen to also have been an actual character. So most of my characters are historical, but then I fictionalize them. He has this red sulfur from that era. Nobody can make it anymore, so everybody is after him. Everybody wants to get it because it's the last red sulfur. Just imagine if somebody now has the essence of all creativity with which you can make everything, and you're the only one in the universe that has it. Everybody would be after you. And not only are kings and presidents and all those kind of people after him, it's also that phantoms are after him. And so he has to battle with both worlds. But the interesting thing is that he so he needs to pass along this red sulfur along his bloodline, because the red sulfur will only manifest in the bloodline of the one who made it. And he doesn't have children, and he falls in love with the woman, and she falls in love with him, and she can't have children, and she says, maybe my daughter will have children for us. And so then we thereby is created this incredible triangle between mother, daughter, and alchemist, and all havoc breaks loose. And so they have to keep on protecting this red sulfur, and um, it creates a whole new world.
And that's the Alchemy Saga, Red Sulphur. And there's 4 books of it coming out in the fall. You've been busy. All 4 books. Is that like different parts, right?
Yes, they are all different parts of the same saga, like Dune, and so it's a new saga of several. I hope that one day it will also be a television series. That because it's very romantic. It is about the period where there was the big battle going on between the church that was represented by Louis XIV in Versailles and the Dutch Republic that was trying to give tolerance and let science grow. And so it's a whole battle for the birth of science. And many people don't know about that. Many people don't know about how all this technology was created by science and started in the 17th century.
How long did it take you to write 4 books? I mean, that sounds like a lot.
10 years.
10 years. Cool. Definitely want to check it out. It sounds intriguing for sure. And one subject I want to get into, it's near and dear to our hearts, and the title of the show, the Mabus word, is apocalypses. And of course, if we might go back to some of the other subject matter, but I want to definitely get into that. And what it reminds me, for some reason, I was thinking of that. There's a Nostradamus movie, and it's like a movie that it's old. I forget, the 90s or something. But in it, supposedly the story goes, he was out healing people from the plague with herbs and things like that. But his own wife and daughter got the plague and passed away. And by the time he got back, they were dead. And he supposedly, went mad, and he kind of entered that apocalyptic stage or setting. And that's kind of what they say in the documentaries and books about him as well, on some level, with different views of it. But he got into an apocalyptic mode of thinking, did the quatrains, and a lot of those quatrains, no matter what you think of them, some of them are pretty weird. Like the Hitler stuff that he predicted, he got pretty close to that. So, I mean, there's a lot of debate about all that stuff, of course. But there's one question that I saw in the book stuff, and it was a relationship between an apocalyptic mode of thinking and burnout. And sometimes, I mean, when I read that question, I was like, well, that sounds like me sometimes. It's hard not to be in an apocalyptic state of mind with the way this world is. Things are crazy. And sure, maybe you can get in a certain point of view to where trying to create heaven on earth and pretending it's not happening, but sooner or later, it's still going to knock on your door pretty much. Things definitely seem, a lot crazier lately. But basically, I just want to hear, about apocalypses and the mode of getting in that state of mind, which one would say that's what Nostradamus did on some level. And I'm sure a lot of different people throughout history have, with the way the world is and the craziness and darkness in it. And, all the murder and disease and all the other crazy stuff that's constantly happening. But what can you tell us about apocalyptic mode of thinking and then burnout?
I've organized several conferences called Facing Apocalypse, and they were about the apocalyptic state of mind in politics. And I started out with the nuclear issue, and in 1983, and then when it was decided that the next conference in 1985 would be in Moscow, people said, don't do it in 1985, it's way too long. By 1985, we will be in nuclear winter. So that is apocalyptic thinking. Apocalyptic thinking is that we are moving towards the end of the world, because apocalypse means revelation. It's the revelation of a new world, but it's a revelation of a new world as the old world is coming to an end. So it is frequently seen as doom. And then in 1990, I organized a Facing Apocalypse about the environmental issue and how global crisis of climate change and those kind of things. That was 30 years ago. And the danger of apocalyptic thinking is that you are treating something that is going to last for hundreds of years as if it has to be solved in 5 minutes because the world is coming to an end. And that makes people burn out because you cannot hold that level of alert constantly. With climate change, what is happening, and we are, I think, every 3 days using up the amount of energy that the earth can compensate for by trees every 3 days. So we are creating much too much greenhouse gases. Everybody agrees on that. Maybe some people who don't agree on that just don't want to read the science, but everybody agrees on that. But if you say that that means that the world is coming to an end and that this has to be solved in a very short period of time, then you get people in a state of alert that is too high and you cannot maintain that. Our children and grandchildren and great grandchildren will have to deal with this every day in the same way that you have to brush your teeth. This is an ongoing thing. And if you get into an apocalyptic state, then you cannot deal with it over long periods of time. So that is part of apocalypse and why it's dangerous to get into an apocalyptic state of mind, even though the situation is dire. The situation is terrible. We all agree on that. The situation is terrible, but we have to work on it for generations and generations to come.
There was something I saw, and I was an article or something. It was advice or something like that. But there was some kind of paper that was written about what would happen to the earth with all the stuff going on that you're talking about within the next 10 years or something like that. I don't know every detail of it, but basically this group got to read the paper, and later that some of them had to get counseling after reading it, that it was just so terrible with the stuff going on with the earth and everything.
Yeah, because when you look in the 80s, I started working on this in the late 70s. When you look at it in the early 80s, everybody was expecting the world coming to an end through nuclear winter. And it would drive people crazy. The nuclear clock was at 6 minutes to midnight for a decade. And so it was that we are almost on the verge of nuclear war. We're almost on the verge of destroying the world, and we will freeze to death in nuclear winter. And so now everything is happening through heat, which is true. Which is true. But if you go apocalyptic about it, then you can't do anything about it because you think it's going to happen in the next 10 years. And if you think it's going to happen in the next 10 years, that's would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Well, that's how some of those cults there got into it. There with thinking the end of the world. Wasn't there the one that was in I think it was in California where they had the men castrate themselves, thinking that the world was ending, and there was a spaceship coming by just to get that
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
There are there were a lot of them in the 19th century as well. I think there were 67 end of the world movements in the 19th century. So it seems to recycle. There were end of the world movements in the 17th century. Every age has its own end of the world cycles, and now we are around the year 2000, and anything that is about 1000 in Christianity, the millennium is a very important symbol. So around 2000, of course, the apocalyptic imagery is getting stronger. That's why I started this series of apocalypse conferences. I did an apocalypse conference about holy war, because holy war is part of the apocalyptic imagination. It's the battle between good and evil. And you can see, for instance, that this apocalyptic thinking is going on very strongly in America, where everybody's polarized between good and evil. That's apocalyptic thinking. Very dangerous.
Mhm.
Because you get apocalyptic battles of good versus evil, and if you do that, you're sunk.
Right. That's almost like what the AOC narrative is in the States there, with the part about this whole global warming. We're killing everything. Everything's going to be done. We don't do things now. Follow my views. We're sunk, right? And
Well,
you
yes,
see a lot of kids that are sort of parrot that narrative.
I think that the narrative itself is basically making things literal. It is absolutely true that the world is in a dire condition, and that this dire condition is going to continue. It is not going to be resolved soon. We
Hmm.
should try to resolve it as soon as we can, but that can take a long time. And if we are, there was this very wonderful doctor. Her name was Helen Caldicott. She was working in the 80s, especially in the 80s, against nuclear war, and she was saying, if we um, elect Ronald Reagan, we will not be able to turn the clock back, and we will move into nuclear war. And she was constantly talking about how we're almost at the end of the world. We're almost there. We're almost at the end of the world. And she burned out. Everybody burns out if you do that. We have to see to it that this is a problem that is a generations problem. Will go on for hundreds of years, and we have to solve it. We have to do something about it. But to say that it's in 10 years, I've heard that story.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've also seen things like the half the world's wildlife population has passed, and think crazy numbers with that. That's really
Well, that's
concerning.
true. No, it's
That's true.
absolutely true.
It's
In
depressing.
Germany, they found that a vast majority of the insect population is gone, which means that the bird population will be going. All these things are true. It is just, if you put them in the context of the end of the world, then you can't sleep at night.
And it's mostly just being in the thought process of it ending soon, and good versus evil, and holy versus unholy. And you get, I guess, in the 10-year narrative that you have 10 years left on the planet, I could see how it could be emotionally taxing, draining.
Yeah, and it comes back again and again that we only have 10 years, and some people say we only have 3 years, and that is apocalyptic thinking. Um, there is going to be disaster. There's no doubt about it. If this goes on, the sea levels are going to rise. There's a piece of thing, an iceberg floating from Antarctica that is so huge, and it's beginning to melt. And so there are dreadful things about to happen, and they
Yeah,
are already happening. It's not that
yeah.
they are already happening. But if you
Just
put them in the
yeah.
context of that the world is coming to an end, then you give the world to the cockroaches and say they are the only ones who are going to survive.
So part of it overcoming it is a positivity, just trying to overcome it from a spiritual point of view. It's kind of like embodying heaven or hell. You want to do heaven, but if you're in hell, like there was a quote from Neil Gaiman, this author, that said, "Hell's something you carry around with you." But
Yeah,
so
but heaven and hell is also an apocalyptic notion.
it's the
If
same
it's not
thing.
that we're either in heaven or we're in hell, we are in both constantly. Heaven and hell are going on all the time. It is not split. It is not that there's heaven and there's hell. No, it's going on all the time at the same time. And we have to wrap our minds around it that this stuff is happening constantly. And we will have to deal with it constantly.
So how do you? What are some ways to get out of that kind of thinking, that or the burnout? And have you ever yourself been in that kind of thinking and been burned out with apocalyptic thinking yourself?
No, no, I have never gone into apocalyptic thinking. I have been studying it. I have been studying how apocalyptic thinking works. Um, uh, I personally don't think that the world is coming to an end, even though we're in a very dire condition. I think that the world is in crisis. I absolutely am convinced that the world is in crisis and that we will constantly have to deal with crisis. But I'm not apocalyptic. But I know that the apocalyptic imagination is very powerful because I'm a student of imagination. I study the imagination and I know how powerful that is. And apocalyptic imagination is a dream. And so we live inside the dream of the end of the world and we can't get out. And so we have to analyze how we are in that dream and realize that it's a dream and that we have to wake up from it.
Do you think that part of this is just a thought that I've been having there is with the push of the way that the education system has gone to go for people to move into these cities and basically move populations into an area where they end up you have this overcrowding, people living on top of each other, aka or etc. Buildings, condos, apartments, and stuff like that. We've got away from the part where you're self-sufficient farming, where you are able to take care of yourself, where we've lost our self-reliance, and now we're dependent on I guess like this hive of people in these metropolises, and that maybe that this whole way of thinking, we've sort of overburdened the planet by our population booms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very possible. What happened about 10 years ago is that there are now more people that live in urban environments than live in country environments. So that is a process that is continuing and that will continue more and more rapidly. I don't think that the population boom will remain. I think that it's already slowing down. Um, and but I do think that it's much more difficult to live in the current world where everybody or the majority of the world population lives in urban settings. That has huge problems with it, of course, and we cannot go back. The notion that we could go back and all live in the country, we cannot go back because it is a movement, a gigantic demographic movement towards the cities.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also forces on, the earth, on politics, or, secret societies or whatever, that want these apocalypses to happen, and they kind of add to the narrative in their own ways, and want this stuff to happen. And right now, with all this Russia Ukraine stuff, it's definitely, the fear is a lot, and it can push people into apocalyptic thinking, with just when you have something that crazy happening that could just go off at a moment's
Well,
notice.
it's a very dangerous situation. It's realigning the power structure of the world. It is pushing Putin and Xi together, and China and Russia, and so it's a movement of NATO, China, and Russia, and so it's a huge shift and realignment that's going on right now, and so it is a very dangerous situation. If we put it in the context of this is the Third World War, it's the beginning of the apocalypse, then we can't get anything done. We have to see that it's a very dangerous situation, that Putin is playing a game on a very five-dimensional chess game that we don't know how his mind works. And it's very dangerous, but let's not get into the notion that it's the beginning of the Third World War.
See, there was talk that after the Second World War, the Third World War already started, and that's why China has gone to the length that it is to right now to being an imposing power, and a lot of people haven't realized what they're actually doing. That's been one of the theories that has been out there.
Well, I've been teaching a lot in China, so I have a lot of Chinese students in mainland China, and there is a person has come to power who is the first since Mao Zedong who has this enormous amount of power, and they try to get out of their backward situation, moving forward. That's what Mao already was trying to do with the Great Leap Forward, and it was a huge failure, and many million people died in famines. But now, so the push forward was already going on in Mao, and now it's going on with Xi, and so they're trying to do something, and it's a very powerful movement that we have to be very aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not just Xi. It lives in China, that desire to pull up and the desire to become on the same level as the United States. There's a desire for that.
Yeah. That was just one of the theories that had out there or whatever, and I just see it. I'm here in Canada, and we have this. We call him J.T. Castro, but he glorifies the Chinese president or the leader over there, and there's even right now we have that trucker convoy that's going on down in Ottawa where people are protesting mandates and stuff like that. But you're seeing that. I guess over this past 2 years of pandemic, you're seeing how people are sort of tired of this autocratic or authoritarian rule that's going on, and then you have a prime minister that glorifies a communist leader. It's sort of really surprising that some people are really sort of starting to sort of pay attention to or wake up from.
Yeah, I think that there is a gigantic realignment in the world going on, and I think that whatever you think about Trump, I think he made a huge mistake by pulling us out of the Pacific group, and he gave it all to China. And I think that we should realize that there is now some group going on that is becoming as powerful as we are in the West. And we haven't had that because Russia never really was that. But China is becoming that, so there's a huge change going on. We're moving very far afield from alchemy, aren't we?
Yes, but also there is actually we even stayed there with China, but there is a lot of Chinese alchemists there too as well. I watch a lot of Chinese old movies and stuff like that. They deal with their many different gods and demons and their structure of how their life goes. But they were the first ones that came up with dynamite or fire or with a powder or whatever, black powder.
Yeah, gunpowder, but they'd never use it for guns. They use it for fireworks only.
Yeah, exactly. But even if you watch some of their old movies and stuff like that, or even their new stuff, they deal with a lot of this part of alchemy and magic and
absolutely.
This mysticism.
Very powerful. Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the great books on alchemy is called The Secret of the Golden Flower, and that comes from China. That is Chinese alchemy, where where it's also very similar to Tantra, where Tantra is a form of alchemy that's an internal form of alchemy that you can work in your body, build up the pressures, and transform your body that way, and your erotic presence. In Chinese alchemy, there's this interplay between what is going on inside the body and outside, and The Secret of the Golden Flower is actually how Jung first became interested in alchemy, and me going to the Jung Institute is how I became interested in alchemy, came through China.
And Jung, I know I was making sure I was saying that right. I know it's Jung, but you kind of say it Jung.
Yeah. And Jung was a great psychologist and an alchemist. He studied alchemy a lot. And the reason why we are interested in alchemy is not so much to make physical gold. I've never been in an alchemical laboratory, but we take the material that you have that is quasi-physical, like the material of your dreams, or for instance, these beings of light, that we take as material that can be worked in an alchemical way, so that if you move into the presence of these beings of light and let yourself be absorbed by them, you will have experiences that in alchemy may be the experience of creating gold. And that's how, so we are using alchemical processes to understand psychological processes as they happen in the depth of our imagination.
Well, wasn't the Philosopher's Stone there supposed to be something that allowed you to live forever, right?
Yes, and that's why in my novels, it also moves towards that offspring of this alchemist and his beloveds, they are eternal. So they become immortal, and immortality is a very important part of alchemy. The search for immortality is a very important part of alchemy, and I described that extensively in Red Sulphur.
Okay.
And it's 4 books. Is that the 4th one the end, or is there going to be a 5th book? Is that the whole
No,
series?
this is the series as far as I will write it.
Okay.
But because they end up immortal and in similar kinds of beings as the Marvel comics, if you want to continue and move them into another era, that's fine with me. I'm not going to do that.
Understood.
Do you think with it, well, because you're a psychoanalyst, right? Is that what is the proper term there?
Yeah.
Okay, so like this is just a thought myself. There is that. Why do you think people come into the mentality of living forever, that they don't want to transition and move to something else?
I think that we are creatures of habit, and the most disruptive thing to our habits is death. And so we are scared because it will be certainly something entirely different. So we will move into a realm, or we will not move into a realm. We don't know where we're going. And people have all kinds of beliefs of where they're going. But I think that we as humans are terrified of the absolute discontinuity of death.
Okay.
And
Because you have many religions, like you have one that they get 77 virgins when they die, and you get another one. You have the
well, if they
Christian
die,
Roman that they go to heaven or hell,
yeah,
so
if they
which is supposed
die
to be
in the
better.
jihad, yeah,
Yeah.
that's why many people would fight in the jihad, because that's where you get to have
Valhalla.
well, that's
The
where
Norse.
you would get all that kind of afterlife. Every religion has their own forms of afterlife. So I'm interested in all these afterlives, and Christianity has a very particular afterlife. The Jews basically don't. And Islam has a very particular afterlife. And according to the Buddha, you come back again and again, and you have reincarnation. All those things are really interesting to me and important, and I've studied them. For me, I have no idea. I am radically agnostic. I have no idea, zero idea what happens when you die.
What about the Norse one? That's pretty cool, though.
Valhalla.
Yeah.
Well, but you only get to Valhalla if you die in battle.
Yeah,
So
it's complicated.
It presupposes you being a warrior. Otherwise, you won't get to Valhalla.
Yeah, and you're supposed to have your weapon in your hand and all this stuff. Sounds complicated for sure. I know you had mentioned earlier something about a method where you would look the beings of light. You would get into their heads, so to speak, to figure out, their side of the how would you do that? I mean, that sounds fascinating to me since I've had those experiences. But could you go a little bit more into that, maybe?
Yeah. What I would do, like for instance with you, is I would have you sense the environment that you're in, describe to me that environment that you're in, how far you are away from these light beings as you encounter them, how they move, what you're feeling as they move, what your feelings are. So we first get into your perspective and your feelings. Then I would help you to go to the presence of these beings and focus very carefully on them until they begin to attract your attention to the point that you become identified with it, in the same way that an actor does with a character. And so you become pulled in by them, and then you begin to experience what it is like to be in a body like that. You begin to sense what it's like to be in a body like that, in this light body, and it begins to move throughout your body. And then you begin to sense what the world is like from that perspective, and then you will get a completely different perspective. So that's basically the way I
Giving
would
me
work.
chills, dude. For
That's my
sure.
day job.
Yeah.
It's
Have
definitely
you
fascinating.
have you done stuff with that with people there, and they've done like regrets of where they've had past lives, and
Yes, but since I am a total agnostic,
mhm.
I don't know if they're actually past lives. I know that they are experiences that feel like past lives,
Okay.
that feel like they have been here before. And
Hmm.
yes, I've worked with that. And I've worked with people who've been abducted by UFOs and all that kind. It feels entirely real. And I cannot judge whether it's physically real or whether it's
Suggestive.
quasi-physical.
Okay. Yeah, that's because that's a thing that we like we've talked about on this on UPRN there, dealing with people that have talked with past lives or had alien experiences or other paranormal experiences or seen something in the bush cryptids and stuff like that that people see different things and to their eyes this is there and not only.
Absolutely, it's absolutely there. When I worked with people who were abducted into spaceships, they were there. I just don't know if they were there in the way that you're there in a dream or whether they were there physically. And I'm not judging. I have no
Mhm.
idea. I don't know if there are UFOs out there. I have no idea. I just know that people have experienced this. These are real experiences. These
Mhm.
experiences
Yes.
are true experiences, but we don't know what they refer to. We don't know if they refer to a physical realm. And then uh, when I was in Cambridge for many years and worked with people about this at Harvard, the leading professor at Harvard was John Mack, and he studied
Oh,
alien abduction. And John went with a group of people to the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, and the Dalai Lama said, "For us, it's no problem because we have entities that materialize briefly and then they
Mhm.
dematerialize.
Right.
For us, we have the only notion that there are material beings and then there are non-material beings.
Right.
But for in Tibetan knowledge, there are these in-between people. So he said, maybe these spaceships are materialized momentarily and then they dematerialize. So for him, it
Mhm.
was not a problem. Depends what culture you're in. So
Mhm.
John sent me these people to see, can I distinguish any difference between their narrative and all the dreams that I've worked with? And I couldn't.
Right. Because it's funny is that what was it, the Pope said there was it 2 years ago that any ET that comes down there, they'll be gladly accepted to the Roman Catholic Church. There, will accept them with open arms.
Yes, 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 yes. But well, that's why it's called the Catholic Church, because Catholic means universal.
Hmm.
so you had John Max in you cases? Is that what you just said? Or
Um,
you? Or
we had this. I was part of this um, thing called PEER, the Project for Extraordinary Experiences Research, and I was sideways connected to it because I knew John. We were friends in Cambridge, and so he sent me several of the abductees to see if I could find any difference between
wow, cool.
their experiences and the experiences that I've worked with in the tens of thousands of dreams that I've seen.
Nice. That's cool that you got to work with him for sure. Well, I've had UFO experiences. I don't know if I've ever been taken, but I've seen weird stuff in the sky over my homes with witnesses, and I've seen some variety of different beings. If
Hmm.
they have taken me, I don't remember anything, but there
Hmm.
have been some weird ones in the sky above places where I've lived many
Yes.
times. And then there's always part of me saying, "Are they taking me and brain wiping me?" And I don't
Yeah.
remember anything.
So my perspective on that is that you had a true experience of them. They were really there in your world. If they were physical, I have no idea. So
Yes,
that's what I don't know.
So with any
definitely.
of these alchemists, there we've heard like stories and that from the ones in the past. There, did they ever deal with jinn or demons or other mystic or other
Oh
other
yeah, all the
bodies
time.
that are out there that
all the
would be
time.
something that would be notable, that that's what they based their whole stuff on there? Because there's one
Well,
part about
the
the,
notion of the existence of these in-between beings. In the Greek world, they were called daimones. In the Arab world, they were called jinns. They are beings that exist in a world where they are not physical, but they present themselves as entirely embodied. And so the alchemists would see salamanders, they would see all kinds of dragons and creatures in the fire. And for them, they would be totally there, and they would interact with them. They would have their tutelary spirits that they would connect to. And in witchcraft, the witches
Mhm.
would be communicating with their cats. And so there are these in-between beings, and they are all over because it's part of a way of thinking that was there from antiquity. It's called Neoplatonism. It is that there is a realm in between, that is a real realm that is in between the disembodied world of spirit and or of eternity, or what we now call mathematics, and the world of the body. There's a world in between, and that is the world of creative imagination, where there are all these beings that are absolutely real. They're fully embodied, but they're not physical.
See, this is it comes into this one part there. Is I remember I was reading this part there about ergot and people that were that was just it was the food that was being spoiled, and people would get hallucinations and stuff like that. So you got to wonder, is that were they taking some sort of food, or maybe their food was spoiled and they came up with this sort of idea or suggestive thing that they were seeing stuff in the fire or seeing something in the tree, and then it just got
Psychedelics.
carried on.
That's again if you go from the fact that it comes from individuals.
Okay.
They would not say that it comes from individuals. They would say this world exists, and we enter into those worlds. And in the visionary tradition, people would go into those worlds and become part of that world and experience that world. And as they would experience that world, um, they would communicate with these entities. And as they
Hmm.
would communicate with these entities, something would change in them, and something would change in their world. So they were real beings.
Okay.
But and so it is not that somebody thought this up and
Hmm.
then talked to other people and they believed them. That's
Right.
not the way it goes.
See, I was thinking about this whole thing with this ayahuasca stuff that was happening there, and people that they have all these testimonies. I went there and I saw these little beings, and I went through the veil and that. And so the person hears that, oh, I want to go and try that. So that they already have that thought in their mind. And then the next person tells them that, and then they try that. They might have a totally different experience, but they see something there. But I was just wondering if it was part of the chemical that was in there that made them think differently, or they dreamt differently by having something that was introduced in their body that was foreign.
Um, uh, some cultures have that. They introduce other things, and ayahuasca is very strong, and you indeed get to see all kinds of things that are in that in between realm, that are not physical but are fully present.
Hmm.
And yes, people, there are dogmas. So people in the 14th century, they would see Christ, and they would see the Virgin. And so the culture that you're in will also determine what you get to see.
Okay.
But that you get into extraordinary experiences, that is the world over. We have the capacity as humans to get into extraordinary experiences in realms that are not physical but present themselves as fully embodied.
Hmm.
That's all over the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, just like I was sort of like I'm always skeptical about things when people tell me say things and that, and I was like, if I haven't experienced it, that's what my wife tells me all the time. There says you won't believe anything unless you experience it, right? And
Yeah,
but
I think
because
that's a very good attitude.
I research a lot of stuff, and then I see similarities of stuff coming through, and I always sort of wonder, it says, okay, is this just passed on that somebody read this and that's what they're expecting to see?
No, I think that there's one very interesting phenomenon that happened. For instance, in 500 BC, there was the notion of yin and yang. You know the notion of yin and yang, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Of when something reaches its full measure, it turns into its opposite, right? That came 500 BC in Taoism in China. At the same time, it happened in Greece. In Greece, there was the same thought that happened at the same time. There was no communication between those cultures. And so there are strange things that happen that is not because one person tells it to another, which is tradition. So it
Hmm.
doesn't come from tradition, but it just happens at the same time. And so you cannot say that it is because one person says it to another. It can be revelation that happens to different people at different times.
Hmm.
But I commend you that you only trust what you can experience, because that's why I'm a phenomenologist. If a person experiences something, I take it very, very real. And I don't know what kind of belief system they're experiencing. It doesn't interest me. I'm interested in the experience.
Right. Well, that's awesome. That's good.
And well, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if psychedelics were in use. I mean, so many cultures have used psychedelics over the years. I've interviewed, had whole shows on that subject, from DMT to ayahuasca to you name it. We've done whole shows on it, and to me, it's just an opening of the senses when you do that stuff.
Yeah, yes, it's we had in the 70s, when I was working at the psychiatric hospital in Zurich, we had an LSD license, so we got it directly from Sandoz, and we used very low doses, like 50 micrograms. And if
Nice.
you look at Jimi Hendrix, when he was where was it? One of the festivals, he took 1,500 micrograms. So
Hmm.
we took that kind of doses, but still the person would be in a state of complete other state of mind for 6 hours.
Hmm.
And my experiences with psychedelics is that you actually get transported into a world that you don't know. And so you get moved out of your habitual consciousness. And as you move out of your habitual consciousness, you get to see new things. It is the movement out of habitual consciousness that creates these experiences. And my whole work is based on moving people out of their habitual consciousness. Because as long as you're in your habitual consciousness, you're stuck there. Nothing
Hmm.
changes. And habitual consciousness is afraid of change. That's why what we talked about before, that habitual consciousness is afraid of death, because everything will change. We're afraid of change. And so you have to help a person slowly to get out of habitual consciousness. And drugs may be too fast for some people.
It just reminds me of that what Jeffrey said, and then what you said. That just all of a sudden popped into my mind. The movie Jacob's Ladder, and it's what the government was experimenting on their soldiers there. And as the guy's dying, he's going through three different lifetimes, and he's seeing a whole bunch of different things of his life in this circumstance and a different circumstance and that. And spoiler alert, he was dying at the end. So if
Mhm.
anybody's listening there,
That's the
yeah,
Tim Robbins one, right? There's the
yeah,
old
yeah,
one. I never
yeah,
saw the new one. I read the reviews weren't so good for the new one, but the old one is definitely some creepy, classic horror right there for sure.
yeah.
And I know, Robert, you had said something about a license for LSD with the government. Did they supply it? Was it like the men who stare at goats or something like that?
This is in Switzerland, and
Oh,
LSD,
okay.
LSD was made by Sandoz in Switzerland. And so we had that license when it was still all legal. This is 1972, 73. And before it all got spoiled by random use of it. And but it's now slowly coming back. And I'm from the 60s, so it was ubiquitous, was everywhere. But it's now slowly coming back and beginning to be used for forms of therapy. Lots of people are microdosing.
Microdosing mushrooms there, that's a big thing that's been coming out through the US there. I've heard more and
Right.
more and more about it that.
Yes.
They're legalizing.
And so that can be quite effective, but I don't know enough about it to say anything useful.
Yes. Seems like with my experiences with it, that you have a lot of spiritual experiences, but it seems to always also be these experiences where you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. When is this over? This kind of experience. So that seems to be some of my
So that's
experiences.
about change, right? Because the
Yes.
fear of dying is the fear of dramatic change. And so you hold off. And we are terrified of change.
That is true. Yeah, that's
Yeah, but I kind of call these cocoons.
That's why we attack strangers. Pardon?
Cocoons, the body, a cocoon. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I bring this up all the time. It's kind of my spiritual go-to movie for the life and death and aliens. Cocoon by Ron Howard. You ever seen that with the old people go to the swimming pool and there's a cocoon and then the cocoon's open and golden beams of light come out? It's an old Ron Howard movie from a long time ago with Steve Guttenberg and Brian Dennehy and Opie did that movie, little Opie. But there's something to it, I'm telling you.
Yeah,
watch it.
Well, I think that much of this stuff is coming up in my novels in Red Sulphur. It is something where you get all these remarkable experiences when you start to deal with this material that really changes you and that really affects you very deeply, like, for instance, the Philosopher's Stone, that would affect everything about you and changes your whole life view. And then you have to see that you have to defend it against the whole world because the whole world is coming in. And so it becomes very intense, to say the
See,
least.
that's sort of like if I would think about this is that you have to experience stuff yourself and go out and expand your mind. Don't let the populace tell you what exactly everything is. You have to try things for yourself.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that my day job is to help people experience more, because people are very, very limited. We are in a very narrow bandwidth. It's like we are still in our minds in a world of a telephone internet connection. It goes very slow and there's very little stuff that can be processed. But if you can expand the mind by, for instance, going into these beings of light and shifting the perspective around, then suddenly there's an expanded mind that happens. And in that expanded mind, you can experience something new.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to figure out who they are, and I've thought everything from aliens to deceased loved
You shouldn't
ones.
think about it. Shouldn't think about who they are. What you can do is participate in their presence and feel who they are, experience who they are, and begin to feel their perspective. And you can do that by becoming as much like them as you can, by following their movements and their presence, their lightness, their energy beings. And as you do that, you will become more and more pulled into them. And then I can tell you, it might become very frightening, because it will be very different from anything you experience as Jeffrey. And so therefore, I think that usually I go relatively slow, because a person might otherwise get really scared.
It's almost like that movie Avatar, where the guy goes into the avatar and he experiences a whole different culture from their eyes and their views.
Yes, so that's what I do all the time.
Okay.
And that's why it's one of my favorite movies. And you can actually enter into an entirely other state of mind. And everybody has that ability. You don't need drugs for it. You can use drugs if you want to. You don't need drugs for it, because you can use the imagination that you have every night. And you can go into your dreaming and experience different perspectives and different things.
Well, that's what a lot of people think this is, a simulation, and these are kind of the avatars, so to speak, ourselves. So those, and with the beings of light, I've also, wondered if that's what we all are out of our bodies. Of course, I don't want to say 100% that I know that, but it's certainly a possibility that that's what we all are. Weird, glowy aliens out of these bodies.
And that is related to the times that we live in, where we can now simulate things, and therefore simulations are becoming more and more how people explain things, and that we are living inside a model because we're modeling all the time. So yes, the notion of other realities gets different names in different periods. In Aboriginal culture, it would be your ancestors. So you would be moving along with your ancestors. Most of your ancestors would be animals. So
my fiance Christina showed me something from a video where they're putting cows in virtual things, and the cows are like in crappy places, I guess, but the cows think they're in green fields, and it's kind of creepy, but they're putting like virtual goggles on cows.
That's a very good idea.
Do you think so? It's definitely weird.
I think it's a very good idea. You can do a lot with virtual reality, and they've worked a lot with returning vets in virtual reality. You can experience the world in a very different way if you go into virtual reality, and that's going to develop more when we get to augmented reality, mixed reality.
And see that this is a part that came up there a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, and when I heard about this metaverse, I said, "You watch." I says, "As soon as this metaverse goes on and people are in there, there's going to be somebody crying rape," and this happened a week ago, and a person went into an area and said that they were raped in the metaverse, the virtual reality way, and wanted to sue the people. You understand that it's a false reality. Right, but you're going to have people that believe that to be real.
Mm-hmm. Right,
and that's a scary thing to start thinking about. That all of a sudden people can be held for a video game, and you end up go to jail for life.
Mm-hmm. Right,
cyber crimes.
Well, yeah. I think that one of the things that is going to become increasingly important is to teach our children in school that there are different realities, and that the imagination exists in different realities, and that when they are in the cyber world, it's another kind of reality than the physical reality, which is another reality than their dream reality. We have to learn that there are many realities that have different laws and different rules, and they have to learn that from the beginning, because they're going to be more and more living in a variety of realities simultaneously.
Right, because like you can go into that virtual world to be a cow, and think that you're in another virtual reality, that you're on a nice farm.
But that's a very old problem. There's this Chinese philosopher called Zhuangzi who said, "I dreamt I was a butterfly, and I wake up, and now I don't know whether I was dreaming of a butterfly, or a butterfly who dreams that he's a man."
Right.
So you don't know that. It's a very ancient problem.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the part that, since we're so new into technology, like I was born in 1970, I sort of came through this whole thing when computers and all this stuff sort of changed. And in the 52 years I've been on this earth, we've moved technologically pretty quick. We haven't really done too much, like we've sped up computers and made them faster, but we really haven't made anything better technologically, right? We don't have flying cars. We can't transport from Canada to Australia and back on a transporter like on Star Trek. We really sort of just made a phone faster that holds more stuff.
Yeah, but you have in your pocket a computer that is stronger, that is, I think, 100 times as strong as the entire computational system that sent people to the moon. So there is a change that is happening.
Right. We've made that faster, but we've never made anything, never gone to the next step of making something new. Right. We've sort of just made things faster that have already existed for 40 years.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of stuff going on in artificial intelligence. I'm myself working on creating virtual humans. And so I think that we are on the verge of an enormous breakthrough. And that is because the speed of computers has increased so dramatically. I'm 74 years old. I did my first work in computers in 1967. And I've seen computers grow, and I've seen virtual reality grow from the 1980s and becoming this whole news. There's enormous shifts that are going on in robotics and all those kind of things. We are not in the 1950s notion of what the future would look like with flying cars and packs that you have on your back that you can fly off. That never happened, but those were 1950s fantasies. And we are.
Well, there is a flying car that just was released the other day there that's actually legal for to be in aviation. And I think it came out of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and that's basically like a drone, right?
It's a car, with wings that come out. Yeah,
there's jetpacks too. They've been seeing those guys out plane windows, like weird dudes with some kind of jetpack. I know for sure.
But we're not like the Jetsons,
right?
And, so the future. There are books about the history of the future. The notion of the future changes all the time, and we have these expectations of the future that are based on science fiction that is never going to happen.
Right.
But the technology is changing everything in your life. Technology, because you have these phones in your pocket, technology changes everything in your life.
So where do you think that the future is going to be? Are we going to be like plugged in like the Neo was in the Matrix and just waiting for somebody to go and pull you out?
So. No,
or do you figure that we're all going to be depressed and that everything's done for us?
No, I think that we will have all kinds of. We will be having experiences that are very similar to The Alchemist. We will be wearing contact lenses that where we can see virtual beings at the same time as physical beings, and they will be all mixed. And I could be talking with you now, but you're actually sitting in my room with me, and I can see you in the room. I can see you entirely three-dimensional. That is going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it will happen in the next 50 years. And so, yes, I think that, and there's going to be artificially intelligent presences that you communicate with, and some of your best friends are going to be artificially intelligent.
Is that what you mean by virtual humans? I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that. Virtual humans.
Virtual humans are autonomous presences that behave like humans and that are entirely made of artificial intelligence. Okay. And it's a field that has been developing, and I'm very involved in it. And
is that like petri dish babies?
Pardon?
Is that like petri dish babies, where you're like mixing human with
like avatars, not chimras? Or is it, hopefully you're not the Terminator Skynet guy either. The Skynet.
It is creatures that you will see on your screen that look like humans, that talk like humans, that feel like humans, and are actually artificial intelligences. And that's a field that has been developing over the last 20 years, and I've been involved in it since 1997, and it's quickly growing.
That's like a real girl getting a computer put in its head. You ever see those real dolls?
Those are crazy for sure. But it's kind of like the holograms in Star Wars, right? Like the holograms.
Like that, yes. But then the holograms who are autonomous.
That's definitely interesting for sure. And I know the holograms. I mean, they do weird stuff with that now with singers that are dead on stage and stuff like that. That's kind of like a virtual human, isn't it? On some level, definitely the weird hologram shows and everything.
Yes, but they're still based on actual humans. These would be based purely on artificial intelligence.
Well, it'll be interesting with Elon Musk and his Skynet there, and then he's gonna have virtual things in the sky there, like maybe the Jesus or some Muhammad or something like that. They're showing up.
That's Project Blue Book stuff. Supposedly that they were gonna do that to Cuba or something, like show a hologram of Jesus that calls like. I don't know, panic or whatever. And I've heard stories where they're going to send a hologram into terrorists' cells, like it was Allah or whatever, so they confess. There's all kinds of weird stuff. But Robert, we're getting down to the last few minutes. It's been great having you on. It's been an amazing show. Thank you so much, Robert Bosnak, everybody. Robert, where's the best place to get your books? And do you want to give a link out?
Yes,
Or links?
the books are out on Amazon, and so you can find them. Red Sulphur, it's books 1 through 4, and you just go to Amazon.com and put in Red Sulphur. There's a first edition of them, but this is the revised edition of books 1 and 2, and then book 3 and 4. So you can go to Amazon, put in my name and Red Sulphur. And you can find where I teach on jungplatform.com, Jung platform.com. And you can find all my courses. I have hundreds of hours of teachings about alchemy if you're interested in alchemy.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a great show. I've really enjoyed it. And it's been an honor to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Have a good weekend. All right, everybody. You're listening to United Public Radio. And we got about 5 minutes left or so. And we'll got Dale here from the Delicious Recipe. When do you come on, Dale, for everybody?
I come on Thursdays at geez, now you're gonna get me screwed up on my times there at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'm the first show of the Thursday night, so of the lineup.
And I'll be coming on Laura Lee's show on the 28th of February. She's got me on her show.
Awesome.
And after that, I'm not doing any more guest appearances for 5 years. So no one else bother me. But no, I'm going to do it, and it'll be fun. So, and I enjoyed your show. And I
enjoyed you asking me to come on yours there. I says, I'm sorry if I talked a little bit too much there, but I actually ended up being a very interesting person that really a lot of different stuff there, a lot of different views, don't you think?
You did great. Yeah. He was tripping me out with the be in the light being's body and see what they were thinking. This is not nasal stuff, by the way, not anything illegal. But yeah, going into the light being's head and seeing out their eyes and all that stuff. That was some trippy stuff. I started to get goosebumps from that. So for sure. And UFO Paranormal Radio. UFO Paranormal Radio is the YouTube channel. And I have the other one right down.
UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials.
That's right.
Twitter.
So when are we going to see you? So do you have a Rick and Morty shirt on tonight, or do you just?
No, I just wore a Levi's. I said I didn't want to do 2 Rick and Mortys on in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a bunch too. Some of them. There's one cool one I have wearing that UFO, and it's starting to look pretty rough. It's like, damn, man, I need to find a replica. But that one's been through the wars for sure. It's one I got. I don't know if I got it at Walmart or something, maybe eBay or something a long time ago. But it's like got holes in it now and stuff. I have like three or four at least.
I got a T-shirt I got from playing a ball hockey tournament back when I was like 19 or 20 years old, and I still have it downstairs, and it's got holes all over it, but it's the most comfortable shirt I ever had.
It's a holy shirt.
And it just has so many memories with it. I don't want to throw it away.
Yeah, when you got something like that, that's memories. Why do it unless you just got to do it? You know, gotta get rid of it. It's good to keep the energy from those times in your shirt, from the events and everything like that. So I'm not even sure. I think I need to catch up on some Rick and Morty. I'm not even sure if I watched the last season. I may be behind a little bit, but I know I watched a bunch of them. But I'd have to double check that last one to see.
Yeah, nothing new's come out there since whatever the last part has come out. So we got where we are there. We had Birdman's back again.
Yeah.
He's been rebuilt out of a test tube. Right, like he was saying, the new part. There's actually the thing about that is so interesting what that Dan Harmon has done there is that he's sort of looking at everything that's going on now and that has happened there, is that this could be a possible future, right?
Yeah, that's what's so good about it. There's just so many parallel realities and all that stuff. That's where it gets really good. I have some of the comics too. There's a hardback I have, or a couple of them, and it has a sound chip in it and says funny stuff when you
Oh
open it
yeah.
or something like that. And there's so many comics now, I can't even keep up with them, so I don't even try. But I know I have some of the hardbacks that are pretty cool.
Well, one thing that I wanted to ask him, and I totally forgot, and I wrote it down, but I forgot. But he was uh, somebody that I don't know if I got this right or wrong there from Robert Bosnak, is that he is somebody that travels from the future back to the past to give information, and that was probably in one of the parts of one of his seminars that I saw on YouTube, or it was out of the site that you gave me there, that he was a time traveler.
That's interesting. I didn't see that, but I mean, it's certainly we should have asked him, but maybe next time. But definitely,
Yeah.
maybe it's something he uses when he does dreams and stuff. Maybe kind of like I don't know. Maybe it's part of creative imagination or something like
Mhm.
that. That's definitely interesting. What
Yeah.
about the John Mack thing? John Mack used to send him cases. That's a big time ufologist from from
Hmm. And
back
then
in
the
the
part
day.
with using LSD in Sweden, because the CIA was using LSD all over the place in experimenting on people. They were doing stuff in California to get do sting operations with hookers in San Francisco. They were experimenting on their own soldiers.
Yeah, there's some
There's like a
crazy
test
stuff.
test garden.
There's some crazy LSD government stuff. He's like he had a license or something. I was like, are they shipping it to you? What happened there?
Yeah, and plus you had that was the whole thing about was that Laurel Canyon with the Doors, and then you also had with the Grateful Dead with LSD and stuff like that, right? Where they were that was part of the conspiracy theory, or part of the actually part of it is actually true, and this was given out, and you never know what your government's doing to you. That's why it's so important to be aware who you vote for when you're voting for your government.
For sure. Well, man, we need to close it out. It's been great.
Yeah,
Thanks for stopping by, and I appreciate it. It's been a good show, and it was a good guest for sure. Definitely, I like the apocalypse talk.
yeah, oh, for sure. We should have pushed that more. I apologize.
No, you did fine. You did good. But there's no qualms here. You did a great job. I enjoyed it, and I appreciate it. And he seemed like he was like, we're getting a little far off base. It's like, well, these are in your questions, dude. So
Yeah,
I, I try not to use all those questions, but
I never
some of them,
used any of them.
yeah, I
I
know I sent them
I
to
read
you.
them and I toss them away. Let them go free form.
Yes. Yeah, I tried to do some free form in some of those, and a lot of times I don't like to use them, but if I'm real tired of it, like, oh, okay, I'll do it. All right, I appreciate it, man. Thanks, Dale. The Delicious Recipe. Check it out, and especially check out my appearance on the Delicious Recipe. We talk soup. That's
Yep.
right. SOUP. All right, man. Appreciate it. Take care, and I'll catch you later. Good night,
Okay.
everybody. Have a good weekend. Stay safe out there, apocalyptic ice storm, but don't be apocalyptic thinking. All right. Good night, everybody.